Hey, we are in Exodus chapter 21 and 22. If you remember, um, the Israelites have just gotten the Ten Commandments, the Big Ten, but you know that there are more rules, there are more stipulations, there are more things to learn than just those 10. And so now we start getting into some pieces in Exodus and Numbers, Deuteronomy, and Leviticus, that deals with the law, that deals with this is the way that you should act. These are the things that you should do. This is what should happen if this happens, type of deal. And so we're just touching the base here in 21 and 22. Behind me, I found this cool, it's an interesting picture of somebody's interpretation of maybe what it was like as they are at the base of Mount Sinai. Now remember, there are a couple of million people, and so you would have them spread all out, the pillar of fire to show them when to move, when to stay still, the tent of where Moses would conduct meetings, where God's presence would be. Then you have the Mount Sinai behind and in the background there where Moses would go up and talk to God. But just imagine dealing with a couple of million people in a valley and trying to feed and get everything right. And thankfully God provides all of that. So let's get into Exodus chapter 21, and you can follow along. The Lord gave Moses the following laws for his people. If you buy a Hebrew slave, he must remain your slave for 6 years. But in the 7th year, you must set him free without cost to him. If he was single at the time you bought him, he alone must be set free. But if he was married at the time, both he and his wife must be given their freedom. If you give him a wife and they have children, only the man himself must be set free. His wife and children remain the property of the owner. But suppose the slave loves his wife and children so much that he won't leave without them. Then he must stand beside either the door or the doorpost at the place of worship, while his owner punches a small hole through one of his ears with a sharp metal rod. This makes him a slave for life. A young woman who is sold by her father doesn't gain her freedom in the same way that a man does. If she doesn't please the man who bought her to be his wife, he must let her be bought back. He cannot sell her to foreigners. This would break the contract he made with her. If he selects her as a wife for his son, he must treat her as his own daughter. If the man later marries another woman, he must continue to provide food and clothing for the one he bought and to treat her as a wife. If he fails to do any of these things, he must be given her freedom. She must be given her freedom without cost. Death is the punishment for murder, the Lord said. If you did not intend to kill someone, and I, the Lord, let it happen anyway, you may run for safety to a place that I have set aside. If you plan in advance to murder someone, there's no escape. Not even by holding on to my altar, you will be dragged off and killed. Death is the punishment for attacking your father or mother. Death is the punishment for kidnapping. If you sell the person you kidnap, or if you are caught with that person, the penalty is death. Death is the punishment for cursing your father or mother. Suppose two of you are arguing and you hit the other with a rock or your fist without causing a fatal injury. If the victim has to stay in bed and later has to use a stick when walking outside, you must pay for the loss of time and do what you can to help until the injury is completely healed. That's your responsibility. Death is the punishment for beating to death any of your slaves. However, if the slave lives a few days after the beating, you are not to be punished. After all, you have already lost the services of that slave who was your property. Suppose a pregnant woman suffers a miscarriage as a result of an injury caused by someone who is fighting. If she isn't badly hurt, the one who injured her must pay whatever fine her husband demands and the judges approve. But if she is seriously injured, the payment will be life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, cut for cut, and bruise for bruise. A lot of people use that text there in 22 as in dealing with abortion and why abortion is wrong. Verse 26. If you hit one of your slaves and cause the loss of an eye, your slave must be set free. The same law applies if you knock out a slave's tooth. The slave goes free. A bull that kills someone with its horns must be killed and its meat destroyed, but the owner of the bull isn't responsible for the death. Suppose you own a bull that has been in the habit of attacking people, but you have refused to keep it fenced in. If that bull kills someone, both you and the bull must be put to death by stoning. However, you may save your own life by paying whatever fine is demanded. The same law applies if the bull gores someone's son or daughter. If the bull kills a slave, you must pay the slave owner 30 pieces of silver for the loss of the slave, and the bull must be killed by stoning. Suppose someone's ox or donkey is killed by falling into an open pit that you dug or left uncovered on your property. You must pay for the dead animal, and it becomes yours. If your bull kills someone else's, yours must be sold. Then the money from your bull and the meat from the dead bull must be divided equally between you and the other owner. If you refuse to fence in a bull that is known to attack others, you must pay for any animal it kills, but the dead animal will belong to you. Dealing with property, the Lord said in chapter 22, if you steal an ox and slaughter it or sell it, you must replace it with 5 oxen. If you steal a sheep and slaughter it and sell it, you must replace it with 4 sheep. But if you cannot afford to replace the animals, you must be sold as a slave to pay for what you have stolen. If you steal an ox, donkey, or sheep, and are caught with it still alive, you must pay the owner double. If you happen to kill a burglar who breaks into your home after dark, you're not guilty. But if you kill someone who breaks in during the day, you're guilty of murder. If you allow any of your animals to stray from your property and graze in someone else's field or vineyard, you must repay for the damage from the best part of your own harvest of grapes and grain. If you carelessly let a fire spread from your property to someone else's, you must pay the owner for any crops or fields destroyed by the fire. Suppose a neighbor asks you to keep some silver or other valuables, and they are stolen from your house. If the thief is caught, the thief must repay double. But if the thief isn't caught, some judges will decide if you are the guilty one. Suppose 2 people claim to own the same ox or donkey or sheep or piece of clothing. Then the judges must decide the case, and the guilty person who will pay the owner double. Suppose a neighbor who is going to be away asks you to keep a donkey or an ox or a sheep or some other animal, and it dies or gets injured or is stolen while no one is looking. If you swear with me as your witness that you did not harm the animal, you do not have to replace it. Your word is enough. But if the animal was stolen while in your care, you must replace it. If the animal was attacked and killed by a wild animal, and you can show the remains of the dead animal to its owner, you do not have to replace it. Suppose you borrow an animal from a neighbor and it gets injured or dies while the neighbor isn't around. Then you must replace it. But if something happens to the animal while the owner is present, you do not have to replace it. If you had leased the animal, the money you paid the owner will cover any harm done to it. The Lord said, suppose a young woman who has never been married and isn't engaged. If a man talks her into having sex, he must pay the bride price and marry her. But if her father refuses to let her marry the man, the bride price must still be paid. Death is the punishment for witchcraft. Death is the punishment for having sex with an animal. Death is the punishment for offering sacrifices to any god except me. Do not mistreat or abuse foreigners who live among you. Remember, you were foreigners in Egypt. Do not mistreat widows or orphans. If you do, they will beg for my help, and I will come to their rescue. In fact, I will get so angry that I will kill your men and make widows of their wives and orphans of their children. Do not charge interest when you lend money to any of my people who are in need. Before sunset, you must return any coat taken as security for a loan, because that is the only cover the poor have when they sleep at night. I'm a merciful God, and when they call out to me, I will come to help them. Don't speak evil of me or of the ruler of your people. Don't fail to give me the offerings of grain and wine that belong to me. Dedicate to me your firstborn sons and the firstborn of your cattle and sheep. Let the animals stay with their mothers for 7 days. Then on the 8th day, give them to me, your God. You are my chosen people. So don't eat meat of any of your livestock that was killed by a wild animal. Instead, feed the meat to the dogs. there's a lot of things going on. There's a culture there that we just don't understand. I mean, we're living in the year 2020 as I do this video, and times have changed, and we treat people differently, and hopefully we're better in a lot of ways, and in some ways we're not. But God was putting this out so that the Hebrews would know how to treat each other, know how to deal with wrongs that have happened, and we'll be talking more about that as we go along. Hope you have a great day.